Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout, and we have a full house tonight. Tonight we are joined by Lucian Gray from Monarchist Action and our very own Constantine, Leon J. Krolewski, and Thomas Brightsworth is back from a long extended absence. We will also be joined by Toby Cosner from the UMPA later this evening. But the stage is full right now, so he will not be joining us immediately. How is everyone doing this evening?
I'm doing all right, but I should add that I represent radical monarchists, not monarchist action. But hey, details. Just
Sorry.
that's okay. That's okay.
No, precision.
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a long year. Not gonna lie. Been very busy, but nonetheless a very fruitful year. I apologize for not being able to be on for so much, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back.
Leon,
I'm doing
how are
quite
you?
all right. Oh,
I'm doing all right. Just finally finished the semester just a couple days ago, and now I'm rushing around with Christmas gifts for friends and family, Christmas parties, birthday gifts and parties, and preparations for vacation. So it's a very active time right
The
now.
I
holiday
can already
season is
hear
always a
Mariah Carey
hassle.
singing in the background.
She's been there
I
for weeks,
hate that song.
and she gets massive checks every time, every season.
oh yeah, the royalty check's got to be nuts.
How about you,
Anywho,
Constantine? How have you been?
I've been doing fine. I finished the semester myself. I didn't do so well on my final, but I had enough of a good grade in my class that I didn't need to do well on my final in order to pass. And I'm taking next semester off for travel, so I'm not worried about it.
Nice.
Anywho, yeah. Anywho, so our first topic tonight is being introduced by Lucian Gray, who unfortunately cannot be with us the full episode, so we're letting him go first. Lucian, if you would please.
All right. Thank you, William, for this opportunity. So today I wanted to point out an interesting statement made by a prominent figure in the American First movement. And this statement was made a while back in a Twitter group chat that with Nick Fuentes and Myron Gaines and a few others. And I'll be sure to post my sources in the comment section. But in this group chat, Nick Fuentes said that Europe must be, quote, more dependent on the United States, end quote. And he asserted that, quote, it's ironically America first to keep these countries dependent on us, end quote. So these are his actual words. So this essentially makes his policies imperialistic. So it's basically kind of like a neocon, but for a different ideology. Now, here's the curious part, like for me. To my understanding, one of the reasons why America First has gained a lot of traction is because they appealed to a lot of right-wing isolationists who do not want foreign influence or any entanglement in foreign conflicts, which is understandable. In fact, leading up to the 2024 election, Fuentes called upon the quote-unquote anti-war supporters to not vote for Trump. But now he welcomes foreign entanglement in order to keep America's allies dependent. So any isolationists who are warming up to Nick Fuentes should consider what he said about keeping America's allies dependent on us, and they should ask themselves if they would still want to board the Groyper train, so to speak. So this brings me to this question. This is an honest, a good faith. I'm trying to be good. Ask a good faith question here to any America First people watching this podcast. How would do like if they're going to define what it means to be America First? What should be the interpretation that should be generally accepted? Should it be an isolationist interpretation or an imperialist one? Now, I'm whichever interpretation they stick with, but they should not let anyone like Nick Fuentes conflate the two interpretations and go back and forth for their own agendas. So that's the thing that I wanted to say about Nick Fuentes and the question of America First and the Gripers conflating it and so on. So yeah.
Now, as someone who generally is very much a staunch American nationalist and is unironically pro-American imperialism, I have mixed feelings on this because while, yes, I do see Europe as our de facto sphere of influence and the European nations as our quote-unquote vassal states, I want my vassals to be useful. I don't want them to be useless dependencies at the same time. So, my idea of what America First should be in our foreign policy is yes, Europe remains staunchly in our sphere of influence, but I want them to pull their weight in the sphere of influence.
So, if I may, I agree with Lucian on most things. However, I think we have to take in consideration a few other things. So first, we talk about the isolationists versus the imperialists in the America First movement. Let's just call it that for now. Has Nick Fuentes ever came out openly saying he is an isolationist? That is the first thing we need to clarify, because if not, he's not per se contradicting himself. Second, I think you would also agree, Lucian, that it's not a direct contradiction to say America first, but America also is interventionist, is imperialist, keeping Europe dependent. I do disagree with the analogy of Will, no offense, about Europe being vassal states of America. I think that doesn't historically work. Puppet states would probably be a better one, but Europe isn't puppet states. They are heavily dependent on us, most definitely. We are the Western hegemon. But the real question is, but like Lucian, you're correct that we have to answer this. The only way I could see America, the American First movement needing to pull out of Europe is if our alliance with them or if their dependence on us leads us into more conflict with the rest of the world. And this includes Russia, this can include even the East and Africa to some extent. Because if, and this is just my opinion, I am not an America First person. I put my country first because that is the order of mores, the hierarchy of love. I owe it to my country to serve her more than any other. But the way I see it, unless America is being pulled into foreign entanglements too far by having Europe be dependent on us, and I'll just say for war for now, that's the basic one. I don't think it's a direct contradiction to say that Europe being dependent on us, or I don't think it's actually bad in of itself for Europe to be dependent on us, because that still seems to put America first.
If that's your take on foreign policy, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to debate whether we ought to be isolationist or imperialist.
Absolutely.
I'm not here to. I'm not here. Oh, pardon me. I just want to clarify. I'm not here to debate whether America First should mean isolationist or imperialist. Like whatever stance you take on that, whatever your take may be, fine. My point is that the America First people should try to. There should be a consensus among the America First crowd as to what exactly America First would mean. Is it going to be isolationist or imperialist? And it's because without that clarity, without that mutual clarity, they would allow people like Nick Fuentes to kind of like play both sides, where on one hand he could play to the anti-war crowd, and while at the same time appealing to the imperialist crowd. And so about your question as to whether or not Nick Fuentes explicitly called himself an isolationist, I can look into it, but I don't. But I think Nick Fuentes is too smart to put himself fully in a single camp. And it's like basically Nick Fuentes strikes me as someone who's clever enough to try to play both sides. So which is why I don't think he would make such explicit statements. Though I can look back and try to confirm this. But my concern is him playing both camps within the America First crowd. That's basically where I'm coming from.
That's a fair point, and this will be the last thing I say for now. Is that I do kind of disagree that he's playing both sides. You're correct. He is intelligent to where he wouldn't try to alienate too much. But the fact is, he's also, for better or for worse, brutally honest. He has been explicit. In fact, the reason he is so popular is because he's very explicit with what he believes. That includes foreign policy, it includes domestic policy, it includes religion, it includes economy, it includes conspiracy theories. He's probably the most explicit man in America we have. Playing both
Okay.
sides isn't really his milieu in anything else, including the Republic. And he doesn't seem to worry too much about appealing. The thing that makes him appealing is that he's not trying to appeal like many in the government, many other conservatives, neocons. So I guess, and this will be the last thing I say, the main reason I disagree is that if he's not trying to play both sides in almost any other field of politics that he's discussed, why would this be the only exception? And it seems like the little bit I've watched of him, and again, I'm not defending Nick Fuentes. I personally am not a fan of him. But it seems that he has been very explicit. It doesn't seem to me that he's pulling both sides because he
I
doesn't do that for any other politics, and his talking about this is the same as all these others subjects.
I see what you're saying. I'm not, and yes, yes, Nick Fuentes is very open about what he believes, but I still would not put it past him to 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 play both sides in the sense of appealing to different factions with competing interests for the sake of coalition building, which in this case I think it's like if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But again, from what I gather, and from what I've observed, which again I'll put the sources and I'll try to remember to put my sources in the comment section. But that is the impression I'm getting, that he is actually playing to both sides.
If I may, and this is just my opinion, but Nick to me seems like a man who, and the reason he doesn't play the reason he plays both sides is because he is in fact a grifter. And Nick seems like to me to be the kind of guy who isn't playing both sides specifically because he's trying to build a coalition or anything, but because he's trying to build as much of an audience as possible because that's where he gets his money, that's where he gets his fame. So I feel like at the same time we need to also be very honest about ourselves about who Nick Fuentes is and that he's functionally a very unserious person who does things disingenuously, who has even said openly in the past that he doesn't like his own audience and he thinks his audience are a bunch of idiots.
Because they are.
Well,
Yeah,
I
'cause they
think
are.
we should also take into account something here. This is one thing I don't like about Nick Fuentes. Of all the things you could say about him, many of the things he says, and I've said this before, and I've even met people who aren't exactly followers of him, but even some who are followers of him, admit this, that he is both, not to be contradictory, he's serious and unserious at the same time. A lot of the clips people post of him, especially the bad ones, are sometimes pure irony, while others are sometimes his genuine beliefs. And that is the hard part about dealing with not just Nick Fuentes, but like even people like now we're seeing it, Candace Owens, many who are just going out and saying the most explicitly borderline crazy statements is that they sometimes don't always clarify, and that's where you have to in a way watch the entire videos. Even though he like makes a video every single day, a live stream every day, which makes it much more difficult to determine and watch because that's so much. But of all the things you can say about Nick, he's definitely scandalous. I know as a theocratic Catholic monarchist, I am myself scandalized. It makes my side look bad. But I also think we can't immediately attack him with disingenuousness. Sorry, disingenuity. I don't even know the word. Because on one hand, yeah, sure, a lot of things he says are jokes, they're rage baiting, etc. But on the other hand, this guy, and he's right about this, has had people come to his house with weapons, with guns to shoot him. He's been threatened on several occasions. He has stood up for what he genuinely believes. He has gone live to do serious actual debates, and this is where like people often they what's the word, underestimate him in debates. They think he debates in the same way he does when he's doing his live streams. In reality, that's not the case. So if we're
Yeah,
gonna
you make
attack
it.
disingenuous, we have to make clear what exactly he's being disingenuous about, because there's a lot of things he has stood for, a lot of things he has said, including a lot of his later ones after Charlie Kirk's assassination, have been a lot more genuine. Now, again, I'm hoping he slowly progresses into being much more virtuous, especially in his speech and his policies and his beliefs. I think ever since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, he has very much started a progression of that, but that's just my opinion. But we have to make clear, if we're going to call someone disingenuous, we're going to say someone's acting a certain way, we have to make clear what they're being disingenuous about, because there are a lot of things where he's just joking, but also a lot where he's being genuinely serious. The way he talked about Charlie Kirk's assassination is not the same seriousness as if he's talking about segregation.
Yeah, you make a good point that we should be careful to determine whether or not someone is saying something out of sincerity or out of irony. So it's very important to have context. And but sometimes when people make statements, and when you listen to those statements, it can be the sincerity can be very apparent, or the irony can be very apparent, but sometimes it could be very fuzzy. So yes, we have to be really careful. I agree.
I'm of the opinion that irony doesn't matter, that if somebody is brave enough to make a public statement like that with their face, they should be taken seriously just for the simple fact that they had the nerve to say something. Like, irony no longer matters if a statement is made in obvious poor taste.
Well,
Because
that's another perspective to
people
consider.
with irony at least understand that there are boundaries.
Boundaries? What are boundaries?
Okay, people who are well adjusted with irony understand boundaries.
People who are sane, Constantine.
I'm sane. Mostly.
Arguable.
That is up to scholarly debate, yes.
That is up to scholarly debate.
Oh, yeah, Toby. Yeah, no. Yeah, shut up, Toby. Like, I see you. Shut up, Toby.
Studies show that Constantine was actually more sane than earlier scholarship might suggest.
Leon, you have anything to add to this conversation?
I didn't even really give
frankly,
my
no.
opinion.
I'll be completely honest. I didn't. Now, I'm not to try and start a whole nother debate on it, but like I felt that this topic was a bit unnecessary, only because all it is just like a Lucian just putting a question out to the public, to the audience. I mean, it's not really much for, because like I don't watch this guy. I don't really watch him. I know for a fact that of the few things I've seen of him, I don't like his personality. Not gonna say I agree or disagree on every single one of his political points, but you know, a lot of these commentators and influencers or whatever, from like oh, who are they? Like Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Tucker Carlson. Like, yeah, I'm judging them as much based off the personality as the actual political talking points. And
Yeah, I understand why you would think that's why it was unnecessary for me to talk about this. But firstly, I still think it was a question worth mentioning for this, because uh, again, I think it's important that there should be mutual clarity on the meaning of America first.
I understand it, but like, I'm not saying you're wrong to propose the question or anything. You know, I mean, we want to like have political conversations, not just us here like being recorded on the podcast, but like in general, like actual like civil conversation and stuff. I just like doesn't seem like the biggest thing. I guess I think like when it comes to the America First movement, I mean, those other kind of like contradictions or like not competing factions within it. Like take the matter of like, you know, what is an American? Is an American a civil identity? Is it a cultural identity? Is it a racial identity? I find that much more of an important question and potentially an engaging question than the matters of foreign policy when it comes to it. Not to say foreign policy is wrong, like lesser. I mean, I'm you know I'm studying foreign policy and stuff right now.
If I may,
Yeah,
if I may
sure.
defend Lucian real here for just a quick minute, and maybe we can move on after this. While I do agree with you, Leon, like the example you gave of what is American identity is far more important than a question of American first contradictions. Just because something has a higher importance doesn't mean it doesn't diminish from the importance of the thing that's lesser important. And the fact is, the reason why the Monarchists of America is able to thrive, at least a lot more than it would have like 20 years ago, is actually in the same reason why America First is able to thrive, is the reason that communists are now able to thrive, and we're now seeing even neo-fascist movements, is that there is a rise of, I don't want to say obscure, let's just say niche for now, ideologies all over America and all over the West. We are seeing them come alive like nothing else, growing little by little by little. And the fact is, we're all competing to try and show that our specific ideology is better and more fruitful and more beneficial to the common good of our country specifically, if not the entire world. And if showing a contradiction, the American First movement aids in us showing that our ideology is more of the common good, or it aids in splitting the America
Yeah. And I should add,
First movement, obviously,
Yeah.
and I should add that I think
American
personally I think
divinity
that,
of
sorry.
He's
Christ
still
is much
talking.
more important to us, but it doesn't
Mate,
take
you're cutting in and
away
out.
the importance of the other.
You were cutting in and out like at the latter part of what you were saying.
Sorry. Where?
That's
sorry,
okay.
let me just try to do that.
I get it. I get what you mean and stuff. Like, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have talked about it. I'm just saying it's like maybe the like better talking points or whatever. I don't know. It's like my I know what I want in foreign policy. I have my policy preferences, like I gave in the previous episode. But like, foreign policy is like one of those things where it's like you have to be pragmatic and you have to be dynamic and flexible with it. You can try as much as you want to try and set policy, but you're gonna be more reactive than proactive, and that's just the nature of things.
I didn't even
this would
comment
go
on
for
the
any
imperialism
government.
part.
Oh, sure. Oh yeah, your 2 cents on it, Constantine.
Empire.
Like, again, it's just like, I don't know. Again, I have my preferences, but you also have to recognize there's a pragmatism to it, and this goes for any government of any state, not just like this specific movement. And if they have, it's the America First. It's not like a one party state like the Communist Party of China. It doesn't. It's a decentralized thing. You can have leaders within it that have different views.
Well, the thing is, if you have two polarizing ideologies within the movement, can you actually call it a single cohesive movement?
I think
Yes,
you can.
yes,
Yeah,
you can.
I look in the Soviet Union, for example. Look after the death of Lenin. You had the factions between like Trotsky and Stalin, and
No, I would argue
Stalin.
that those were essentially the same ideology, but with different doctrines and how to go about it. But the way I see like the America First movement, when you have like the isolationist approach, realist one.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, if I could just give the full example. I mean.
Oh, sure. So go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
You had Trotsky, who was the more like imperialist. He was more so, let's go for the throat, go for the jugular. We gotta take over Poland. We gotta take over Germany immediately.
Trotsky was low-key goaded for that.
Who was more conservative. Let's rate it out. Let's play the long game. Let's not just invade countries, like immediately, constantly. Let's wait. Let's slay and see what happens with foreign policy. Let's try.
Trotsky was a Koi 4 player 100 years before the game existed.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
but
again, I'm just it's it's not the biggest.
Yeah, but the difference is that Trotsky and Stalin both ultimately have the same vision, the same goal, i.e., communist utopia. Whereas in America First, you have two different doctrines with two separate visions and goals, like isolationism, where America just withdraws from world affairs and doesn't get involved in it. Whereas with the imperialist interpretation, you have the exact opposite with the exact opposite vision. So
It's
personally,
not necessarily contradictory.
I don't see the major contradiction in it. I mean, you can look in the Republican Party and you can see the still those people who align more with like Bush Jr. and McCain versus those who align more with Trump and Vance. I mean,
yeah, it's not inherently contradictory to be isolationist in one.
Just
empire.
because I mean, look at
splendid isolation is the perfect example of an isolated empire. Isolationist empire works.
Wrightworth and
I see what you're.
Agree with. I can support my claim here with look at the Catholic Church, for example. Everyone outside the church looks at it and sees we're all a monolith. We all just pray to Pope Leo and the Virgin Mary, and we have no other opinions. But
Yeah.
But I mean, you have different groups within the church who still disagree with each other on some things. Now they're still part of the same group, but they still disagree. American conservative bishops versus German liberal bishops, but they both.
Not only that, if I may,
but
beyond to your point,
yeah.
if I may, to your point, you even see in different schools of thought, Thomism and Scotism directly contradict each other when they argue about why Christ became incarnate and would he have been incarnate if man had not been saved. You have the hierocratic theorists such as myself who believe in direct papal temporal supremacy, and then you have those of Suarez's and St. Robert Bellarmine's school of thought who believe in accidental indirect supremacy. You have many examples of this. You have the Suarezians, you have the Thomists, you have the Scotists, all saying contradictory things that are not necessary for salvation, of course, but are still part of the same institution, the same quote-unquote ideology, even with disagreement. So having contradictory beliefs in the same ideological structure does not necessarily indicate that you are not an ideology at all or a movement at all. But they all have to kind of hold on to an essential thing. For example, all these different schools of Catholic thought I've mentioned do in fact hold to the basic central dogmas and tenets of the Catholic faith. The American First movement does have these disagreements on how to put America first, but all agree that America must come before all others.
Okay, that does make sense. I'll admit that does make sense. I'll mull over these critiques and find points that you gentlemen have presented to me. I mean, you all make really good points. I'll mull them over. So maybe you all are onto something here, and maybe I'm wrong or misread this whole thing about the America First. But regardless of who's right or who's wrong, all that matters is that there's mutual clarity on the meaning of America First and the better understanding of what that movement stands for. Because as long as you get mutual clarity, I really don't care if I'm right or wrong about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time and for discussing this question with me.
Of course. It was a
course,
good
thank you.
discussion.
Yeah, you all have a blessed night.
All right.
Wow.
Have a good night, Lucian. All right.
Good evening,
So,
Mr. Johnson.
Y'all hear me well?
yes.
We can hear you just fine. How are you this evening?
Yep.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I am very happy to be back.
Glad to have you back.
I got some good news. Tomorrow I'm going to be speaking with my pastor about possibly taking communion.
Nice.
But that's enough updates. Let's get to the meat.
Wait, what about the potatoes? I like potatoes too.
So, we do have a celebrity among us.
Among
For
us.
those of you who don't know, Mr. Thomas Brightsworth has now been a back-to-back interviewee with two major newspapers, the Times of London and Newsweek. So, tell us, Thomas, how were the interviews?
The interviews were actually really nice. They both took us seriously in the interviews. The first interview wasn't just me; it was also our Vice Chancellor Clements. The second one by Newsweek was just me. The first one was with the London Times, and I did like the London Times article. Some people I know didn't really like it, but it was really good. So the first one was when I was still at they were both when I was at university. And the interviews again were very basic. Most of them really wanted to center around the American monarchist view of the quote unquote King Trump, because of the No Kings protest, and they emailed the Monarchists of America email, trying to consider what we want. And because I'm head ideologist, that we all at the MOA decided I should be one of the main people to speak on our behalf. So most of the questions, at least for the first interview, centered around the Monarchists of America's view of Donald Trump, and exactly how, and also how we would want an American monarchy to look. For example, they asked a lot of questions about regalia, which I found quite interesting. What would American monarchical regalia look? How would the White House look? But they also asked us, why do any of us not want a King Trump if we are monarchists? It's actually a pretty common misconception that American monarchists want Trump to be king. Then every now and then in the first interview, they would ask why we believe monarchy is the best form of government. The London Times interview was very all over the place, and I think this might have been because he was immediately he was writing. Basically, we had to do the interview a little late because when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, may he rest in peace, he had to go do interviews and write articles about that instead, and then he interviewed us later. But the article kind of jumped around, and some people believe that we were affirming things that we did not. For example, it mentioned like Yarvin, I believe is his name, an American monarchist of the Dark Enlightenment movement, who we have no affiliation with whatsoever. It also talked about how there are many absolutist monarchists in America. When we made clear several times the monarchists of America are not absolutists. And then it jumped back to us, and then etc. So the London Times article was kind of all over the place, and if you're just your average reader, you would think we're all interrelated when we're not. It was nonetheless a good article. I found it funny that he made a comment about my three-piece suit. I must admit. If any of you have read it, if any of you haven't read it, you should. But if you have, you know what I'm talking about. Um, but nonetheless, it was pretty good. And then we had the Newsweek interview, and that one I felt he was a lot less pushing back on some of us really quickly. The first one he pushed as a journalist does, which again is fine. I think he was a very nice guy. But he nonetheless seemed the tiniest bit more antagonistic. I'm not sure if I was just reading it wrong. It was still a great article nonetheless. But the second one seemed much more open and to take us much more seriously. Like in the London Times article, they sometimes took little jabs, like the three-piece suit one I mentioned. But in Newsweek, specifically the royal correspondent of Newsweek interviewed us. They took us a lot more seriously. So they focused on the No Kings protest once again, on regalia. They asked a lot of the same questions, but they also focused a lot more on why we want monarchy. Like, what are some arguments we have for why monarchy is the best form of government? And I gave some of the basics. I gave the argument from human nature that based on natural incentive, based on the iron law of oligarchy, based on the family arguments, et cetera, that monarchy is the best form of government. I made arguments from beauty as well, called the argument from aesthetics. I tried not to bring in theology as much, as this was for a much wider audience, but he nonetheless took a much more serious approach to trying to understand our arguments. And when I read the Newsweek article, I liked it much more. It took us a lot more seriously. It didn't take us too much out of context. So I really liked that personally. And overall, it was I really enjoyed the interviews. I really enjoyed the fact that I got to put the Monarchists of America's name out there as well as my own. One main thing I did throughout both interviews is I always made clear the distinction between what the Monarchist of America officially believes, our organization, versus what individual monarchists believe. Newsweek talked about this a little. Like I said, I personally am an integralist Catholic monarchist. I believe in Christendom, the theocratia of papal supremacy. But I made clear that Monarchists of America, as an organization, believes in a Suarezian approach, which is the bridge between the consent of the governed or social contract and divine right of kings, and how we were the bridge between that with Suarez, how we believe in a constitutional monarchy, et cetera, et cetera. And I really liked how Newsweek pointed that out and also made that distinction. The only thing I was a little upset about, I'm trying to remember specifically, I actually forgot what I was just gonna say. Um, I can't remember. Oh wait, yeah, I remember. So they tried to ask like how do we plan on choosing a monarch? And that's always a hard one to answer because we don't really have a set in stone position in the Monarchists of America for how we would choose one. So I basically kind of redirected the question saying, Monarchists of America is still discerning and determining how we would choose a monarch. The main thing we care about is showing the American people that monarchy is not only a viable option, but the best option for America. And once we do that, we will the process of choosing a monarch and who the monarch.
When I get asked that question, what I usually do is say, I say we have criteria as to who would qualify rather than an exact process because it's too early to really lay out a process because we're nowhere close to even being there.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think I mentioned the idea of there has to be some level of criteria. Like it should be someone of a more American. Um, I don't want to say American nobility because that kind of just softens what nobility actually means, but you know what I mean. That they have to be virtuous, obviously. They have to be well skilled in the art of politics. I did say that there are some individual monarchists who believe that we should have someone of European descent, but that the majority of the monarchists of America believe we need an American family, an American dynasty, rather than a European one who can integrate into America.
So, going forward, how do you think we should engage in the press?
I think there are a few ways of going about it. First, I've always mentioned this, and this includes the podcast. Putting our faces out there. I think we're not hiding behind screens. Obviously, we're doing what we can. We're broke college students who can't afford high quality videos like the Daily Wire. But putting our faces out there more would definitely help. We're in a world where image matters, and only speaking behind a screen doesn't fully help spread the Marcus movement as much as it would have maybe a few years back. Now, obviously, that takes time. I myself am always so busy that I can barely make videos as it is on my own personal uh, Instagram, social media account, etc. The second is to reach out to others as well. For example, we did a live Charles Colomb interview a while back while I was studying abroad in Austria. And it didn't put us on the map too much, but it put us on a lot better than we were. So doing stuff like that of actually reaching out to other people to talk to come on and be interviewed, etc., is very beneficial because we can't just wait. Like as much as I love that London Times and Newsweek reach out to us, we can't just wait for others to reach out. We have to also go out. Um, so definitely like live videos with again our faces, etc. Actually engaging publicly on these matters. I know when my university started doing this, a lot more people have noticed my university. Same with all other podcasts. I guess also one idea I had personally is going out and actually not just talking live, but actually engaging live. For example, why did Charlie Kirk, may he rest in peace, TPUSA movement and Louder with Crowder's movements get so popular? It's because they went out, they set up booths, they set up tables to talk to people up front to engage. Obviously, that takes time, it takes money, it takes planning. But if the Monarchists of America is going to grow, we have to do stuff like that and engage physically, which is very hard for us since we're all over the place. We're all working, we're all students, etc. But this is just the facts.
It remains that the greatest challenge for the monarchist movement in America is not politics or funding or even willpower. It is the sheer geography of the United States.
If you
And
donate
that
to the Monarchists of America, we can get an office to do this stuff. Just saying.
true.
That's a great idea. I love this.
I've been begging Austin for an office for a while. I kind of stopped for a while.
I don't think we need an office, but we have stagnated on the banking issue, and we do need to get the ball rolling on that again. Everyone was busy, so it became hard to get all that together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Banking, it's always the banks.
Um, Will, I have a slight caveat to what you said. That geography is the greatest problem. It's definitely one of the great problems, but I would say another great problem, and I'd say probably even a bigger problem, is the sheer amount of laziness that a lot of monarchists actually have when it comes to activism.
I feel like that would be resolved with if the geography problem was resolved.
But see, here's the problem,
More would be willing to go out and like, do physical activism and stuff if they were in teams rather than them just going by themselves.
Here's the problem with that. There are 5 people, 5 monarchists, all within the same county. Myself and 4 others. That's enough for, at least in the UMPA sense, to form a chapter and actually go out and do stuff. None of them, guys in the Missouri chapter, forgive me for putting you on blast on podcast, but they will not get back to me on like, hey, this is when I'm available. Hey, this is where we can meet. They always take their time on answering me, and by the time everyone's answered me, the time has already come and passed. So, like, we're all in the same area. Like, we could get together and actually go out and do stuff, but they just don't. Monarchists, I don't know why, tend to be lazy.
That is just your personal experience, buddy.
Well, I mean, if you putting like maybe personal reasons aside for a second, I mean, theoretically, if you could argue that it's an though it's like an ideological argument there. Like, not saying there is, not trying to like condemn like every monarchist in America, but I mean, part of having a monarch is that government becomes more autonomous. You don't, if it's a democratic republic, it requires the people to be constantly engaged and active. A monarchy theoretically takes a lot of that out of the process. That's all I have to say about that. Well,
Well, and of course, I would have to say, it's like, we don't know what their personal lives are, too, what their personal obligations are like. I mean, some people are hesitant to share that information, and frankly, they rightfully are.
well, yeah, with all the rhetoric online, and then like the rise of actual violence.
The threat
Political
of
violence.
doxing is at an all-time high.
That too.
Yeah.
Anywho, I think we need to segue into our next and final topic of the evening, which, Thomas, is also your idea.
Yes. So one thing that I've been considering talking about for a while, because it's come on the conversation every now and then in the podcast, and it's actually what got me to monarchy in the first place, is religion in relation to monarchy. This is always a frequent subject, and it's something important to talk about, as the large majority of monarchists, include not just in America but in the world, are, or in the West, let's just say that for now, are religious. It's very rare to find, even though we have some in the Monarchists of America, it's very rare to find an atheist who is a monarchist. Very rare to find a secularist who is a monarchist. And by secularist, I mean believes in complete separation of church and state, full wall, no intermingling whatsoever.
French
And
secularism.
wait, what?
French style secularism.
Yes, French style secularism. Supreme leader Macron dictates. But it is something that has to continue to be discussed. And first, why is monarchy so attracted to those in religion and not to atheists and secularists? And second, how do we implement religion into it practically? Because I think what I'm saying is true. There has never been a purely secular monarchy. There has never been a purely atheistic monarchy. There's never been a monarchy without religion attached to it. Even under King Charles III's reign, as King of England, he may be personally secular. He may be pretty irreligious, if I may say so. But nonetheless, his entire ceremony, his coronations, his national identity is built off that of religion, of religious identity, religious culture, religious qualities, religious particulars, religious sacraments, even if I may use high church language. And That is something unique to monarchy. You have oligarchies, you have democracies that have been secular and religious, but only monarchies have been altogether religious. You don't really have you've never had a Hobbesian monarchy without some reference where there's no reference to the divine. Um, and the real question is, how do we implement that in America? Because I know I have my views. I know that the Monarchists of America has almost unanimously agreed to implement Suarez's view of um, natural law and his form of quote unquote social contract or social consent in relation to monarchy and government. But there's still a lot more to discuss, especially since monarchists are so divided amongst lines of religion.
If I may, I would say the closest thing we ever had to a secular monarchy was Napoleon under the French Revolution. If we consider Napoleon Bonaparte to be a de facto monarch in nature, he stylized himself as an emperor after all. But
What's the de
Yeah,
facto part in that?
well, he did have absolute control of France in the style similar to that of the absolute monarchs that preceded him. He legally was Emperor of France and engaged as if he were a royal. So, but I know saying Napoleon is a monarch is a very controversial statement in some
I'd also
circles.
say that even then, and even if you're correct that Napoleon was the closest to being a purely secular monarch, he was nonetheless still very far from it. Even if he was the closest, it's kind of like you have everyone racing to the finish line. You have one person who's closer than everyone else, but they're still so far away. For Napoleon, knew that France was Catholic and that wouldn't change. He made it the state religion. Napoleon had a sacramental coronation, although he completely botched it by taking the crown out of the Pope's hands and placing it on his own head. You have Napoleon trying to implement Gallican policies, Gallicanism being a sort of rebellious sect of the Catholic Church, which has pretty much died off since Vatican completely died off after Vatican I. So even then, if your example is Napoleon, even if I were to agree with you, he's the closest, he's still very, very, very far from being a secular monarchy. And Napoleon brings up interesting questions of church state relations as well. Napoleon kidnapped the Pope, and the Pope made his life a living hell because he tried to assert power over the French church, over actually all of Europe's Catholic churches. And we have many theories as to how the monarch should relate to religion. We have like I think two Protestants in here. We have three Catholics, I believe. Um, if I may just put out the question before I give my long-winded answer, how do y'all think the monarch's relation should to the church, whether it's your personal or one or religion in general, be? What should be that relationship?
Now,
Oh, I'll let you go.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Toby. You're the guest.
So I would say, obviously, the monarch's religion. I think they should be crowned by their clergy for one. I don't think anyone here would disagree with that. Um, I think they should be active within their faith. Of course, I would say that about everyone. But generally, I think it would be right for them to govern as would be seen as virtuous. So, like, they should govern in accordance with their faith. Like, I have that hard time putting words to thought or thought to words, but of course, now in the American context, I think this would probably be easiest if, like, an Anglican. I'm a Lutheran, of course. I'd rather a Lutheran, but I think it'd make more sense for an Anglican because I feel like Anglicans have a better ability to be ecumenical, therefore, of too much sectarian friction. So I guess that's just my ramblings. Will, you probably have something more intelligent to say.
Now, I'm gonna try and use the technical terminology, but I don't know all the technical terminology. The idea of papal supremacy over the monarchy is problematic, in my opinion, because when you put the church above the various states and the various Catholic nations, that inevitably results in the Pope having to engage in politics, and then the secular matters of state will end up polluting the religion itself. We saw this a lot toward the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the early modern period and the Renaissance, such as with the Borgias and other Italian popes, and how they engaged in politics among the Italian states and the great powers of the early modern era. That being said, I'm also against Caesaropapism, which was kind of what happened in early Protestant states. And of course, what we see the most happen in Eastern Orthodox states, where the church submits to the secular authority. Because when that happens, it often results in the church becoming a puppet of the state, and that does much of the same problems, like what we see in Russia today with the Russian Orthodox Church being a de facto puppet of the state, and therefore losing a lot of its trust as an institution because it's fickle. Its loyalty isn't to God, it's to whoever rules Russia.
I
So,
think
if
you see
I'm
that a lot in England too. Caesaropapism pretty much just caused the Anglican Communion to have a schism.
Well,
but
if you're talking about the recent schism, that wasn't due to Caesaropapism. That was due to the debate on the invalid ordination of a woman. In fact, Anglican Caesaropapism
Well,
actually lessened more and more when Elizabeth was brought to power, especially in the 39 Articles. I actually have it up here. And the idea of even the title of Supreme Governor of the Church of England was meant to be a compromise between those who did not believe that a secular monarch, especially a woman, should rule the church, and those who believe that she should. So, when we
I
talk about
think what Toby
Caesaropapism, we have to
and
define our terms.
I think what Toby and William are doing, the expanding it on Caesaropapism to be the church submits to the state, and the state being whoever's in charge, whether it be President Putin or the liberal English establishment, not
Sure.
necessarily just one man with the crown.
what I was trying to, yeah, I was saying is like state, but I was pointing out like how, obviously the schism has been building up, but over time. But what the straw that broke the camel's back was Sarah Mullally being named Archbishop of Canterbury. Who made her the Archbishop? It was the Prime Minister. Officially, it's the King, but in practice, it is the Prime Minister who, I should point out, isn't even a Christian. Like, there is a clear problem to Caesaropapism, especially once the government isn't a Christian government.
So, I guess, so, I see.
Is Keir
To address
Starmer
a
an
few,
atheist?
Yeah, he's a committed atheist.
Leon, I want to hear your thoughts before I go on my spiel, if that's okay.
well, I wasn't done with mine,
Oh, sorry, Will, I
Go
didn't
on.
realize you weren't done. Please continue.
but yeah, so I know there's a technical term for this system, so forgive me for not knowing it, but if we can't trust the church to be senior to the state, and we can't trust the state to be senior to the church, then the church and the state must be separate but equal. Both the church and the state must be separate and equally influential entities in a society, where both the authority of the church and the state is respected and treated as almost, what's the word on, co-executive in a society.
Would there be
I
any
don't like your
realm
wording.
of this is a clarifying question. Would there be any aspect of influence on either part towards each other?
I cannot say.
I mean, let's just say in your ideal, not in practice, but in your ideal of vision of this, would the church have any influence on the state, and would the state have any influence on the church?
No, they can only engage with the society abroad, not with the state apparatus of institution. Basically, separate institutions that each have to engage with society within the confines of their own power without interfering or influencing each other. The state has no power over the church has no power over the state, but both have power over the people, and they keep each other in check through the people.
I'm sorry, but but your idea is purely idealistic.
I know it's very idealistic, but
I am more so asking, yeah, Leon, I am more so asking what is Yard's vision of this before we go into the practicality. So it is idealistic because I specifically phrased the question that way of how we each view how it should be. I start from the ideal and go to the practical.
Gotcha.
so
I mean, for me, I mean, wait, are you done, Will?
yeah, I'm done.
Okay, for me, I mean, I don't know. My views on it have always evolving. Like I'm, part of like for me, pragmatism wins 90% of the time for me. And how I see it, it's like, I don't think religions should be disrespected or should be, and the like followers spit on in public or whatever. But like we live in a very different world now. Fortunately, we just cannot go back to something like the 17th century Europe, or even like 19th, early 20th century Asia. It's just you won't have like it won't be so homogenous, and the religion won't be so like demographically homogenous within a single nation. And really, the power of the churches not only have they like multiplied in number, but they've also lost influence on collectively. And I say collectively, some individuals or groups have more prominence, but most of them have decreased. I think religion is always going to be there. There's always going to be people are always going to be drawn to it, and you can't separate the state from religion or like entirely. It's not practical. I For me, how I see them, I acknowledge that America is historically and still is demographically majority Christian. I accept that, but I just because that's a thing doesn't mean it should like ideologically dominate perpetually. We have to adapt and change, and to say let's put one religion like on top and like subordinate all the others to that religion is just not practical, and it's not. I mean, it's just not practical. Whether you're talking about the leaderships of the groups or just the people on. If you would ask me, I know I'm rambling. If you would ask me, like like in the most ideal, fantastical like version, I am a Caesar Papist. I think when it comes to religion and the state's relationship to religion, it should not be the universal divine truth wins out. It should be the state. It should be what's good for the state.
All right. So I will try to address most of these. Y'all make good points. So if y'all are okay with me addressing something into my, are y'all okay with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
You got the flow.
Yep. Go ahead.
So yeah, I want to say a few things first. Now, obviously, most, if not everyone on here and listening to this knows my views. So to address specifically Will, I want to basically address y'all's claims, then go into my affirmative view. The view of papal politics. And now, Will, you again were very humble about it and admitted you don't know the actual terms for papal supremacy. Again, I'll be merciful there. It is much more complicated than people make out to be. But as someone who is a papal supremacist, I can say it's much more broad than people think. To quote St. Robert Bellarmine, or to paraphrase him, almost no Catholic disagrees that the Pope has supreme temporal power. What there is no agreement on is how that supreme temporal power is to, in fact, be acted upon. So, for example, you worry about the Pope lording his authority over the Christian kings or the Catholic kings in a way that sort of negates the dignity of the state. But if you are afraid of that, then you need not take the hierocratic theory, which I myself hold, that the Pope has supreme direct temporal authority. Very well, Robert Bellarmine of temporal authority. And if you're even more liberal, is not the right word here, I'll just use it for now for lack of better words, quote unquote liberal view, you can take Suarez's view. Suarez, again, takes that view the Pope has supreme indirect temporal authority, which can only be acted upon when the state negatively impacts the church or is negatively affecting the faith of her people, or even acting tyrannical against her people. The Catholic Church has almost always taken, actually, has always taken the side of the people. We see as early as Pope St. Leo the Great, if not even earlier, that the popes talk about how, quote Pope St. Leo the Great, I believe it's him, that the one who is to govern all should be chosen by all. The idea of a virtuous citizenry has a say over the politics, and that the popes are affirming this. You see with St. Robert Bellarmine and Suarez's view that that fear you have of the Pope lording it over is actually remedied through their theology. But let's look historically at papal politics. Now, you mentioned the Borgia popes, but the fact is, the Borgia popes, what's ironic about the Renaissance popes, we'll just call them that, and their political, quote unquote, political grabs for power, is that they didn't use papal supremacy or the theology of papal supremacy to justify it. Alexander the Sixth was not so much a political mastermind as he was lustful, as he was ambitious. He didn't really at all use the theology of papal supremacy or the hierocratic theory, which is the most dominant theory of the time, going all the way back to the investiture controversy. He didn't do that. He was lustful. He abused, he tried to go against many of the Italian city-states, including the Medicis, but he didn't claim papal supremacy. Let's look at the war pope, Pope Julius II, who is the reason the Vatican looks, St. Peter's looks the way it is. He also did not claim that use the hierocratic theory, again, the dominant theory, the theory that I hold, the one of direct papal supremacy over all the kings of the world, including non-Christians. This was the most dominant at the time. It's not anymore, but it was. Pope Julius II, who went to war with so many of the Italian city-states in order to take over them, also did not claim the most dominant theory of papal supremacy. He did basic politique. He claimed land rights, he claimed all these different things, etc. So yes, you have a fact of a pope abusing political power, but not because he was claiming to be the supreme temporal power, but because he was just merely acting realpolitik. And also, popes like popes like Pope Julius II and Rodrigo Borgia or Alexander VI are much rarer than people think. Like, a lot of the popes that are quote unquote claimed to be bad actually were not nearly as bad as people think, were actually pretty good. Pope Boniface, for example, stood up to King Philip the Fair in the controversy where Pope Boniface VIII, again, a staunch hierocrat, and Philip the Fair, ambitious. The reason Pope Boniface VIII made unum sanctum, which is the most strongest claim we have of papal temporal supremacy, it actually, the last paragraph fits criteria for papal infallibility. Pope Boniface VIII only did this because King Philip the Fair was trying to assert more authority over the French clergy, which, including in your belief and mine, fall under the domain of the Church. Philip the Fair, Philip the Fair had Pope Boniface kidnapped, beaten, and he died about a week later, maybe 3 weeks if I remember correctly. But Pope Boniface VIII didn't claim anything new. Even modern scholars look back at that and say that. But Pope Boniface VIII went against Philip and published Unum Sanctum, was planning on excommunicating him because Philip struck against the church first. And in fact, after Unum Sanctum, this is going to be a little long-winded, so I apologize. Pope Boniface VIII made an entire other statement talking about how he does not wish to get involved into political affairs, and that is true. Let's look at the most famous example before I move on. Pope Innocent III, the most powerful political pope in history. No scholar denies this. Pope Innocent III wrote many things regarding the hierocratic theory, regarding the relation between the state and the church. But what's interesting about it is that Pope Innocent III didn't involve in politics if he didn't have to. You have, for example, a letter of Pope Innocent III to, I think it's one of the minor noblemen. And the minor nobleman was asking the Pope about a specific temporal issue. I believe it was I don't know if it was taxes. It was a while since I looked at it. However, it was something that you wouldn't imagine dealing with faith and morals. Now, Pope Innocent III, the most powerful political pope in history, again, wrote back, basically saying, "What does this have to do with me? This is a purely political matter. Go to your king." So we have Pope Innocent III, we have Pope Boniface VIII, we have I'm trying to think of other examples off the top of my head now. We have Pope Leo XIII, we have Pope Saint Gelasius even, who established the Catholic political doctrine of the two swords. All these major political powerhouses, more powerful than the last, Pope St. Pius X, affirming that they do not wish to deal with the temporal. And I can say this historically, that 9 out of 10 times the church and state have gone against each other in the Catholic world, it was always because the state attacked the faith before the faith attacked the state. Now, the issue of separation of church and state, for me, it's less about is separation of church and state good or bad, but to Leon's point, whether it's even possible. We talk about separation of church and state as if it's even an ideal, but reality is impossible. Pope Leo XIII said that the state without a church is like a body without a soul. The church without the state is like a soul without a body, and the state without a church is a body without a soul. The reality is humans are both material or temporal and spiritual creatures. They are united. It would be ludicrous for the soul to try to act without the body, or the body to act without the soul until death. And this is the same with the church and the state. We've seen time and time again how every time the state tries to separate itself more and more from the church, religion comes back into the fold and one has to suffer. This happened in France. It's happening now in France, now that Macron's government dealing with education is now abusing its inspection rights. We see this in Eastern Orthodoxy, in Russia, which is supposed to have separation of church and state. We're seeing it even in America now, where the question of religion impacting politics is here. And we would actually be pretty bad Christians if we did not believe, and this is where I would disagree with Leon a little, I think. We would be pretty bad Christians if we did not let our religion influence our politics or the politics as a whole. Because the fact is, Christianity is meant to, our faith is meant to instill itself into every aspect of our personhood. Why would that be any different if we were governing? It would be impossible, actually, if we were governing. We cannot say we are Christian in everything except how we run a country, and we're only focusing on just natural virtue and natural good. Because by that logic, we would be neglecting Christianity. If you neglect Christianity in one aspect of our lives as humans, we neglect it in all of our lives.
So if I could just make a quick comment, I'm sorry, I just just
Yeah.
to
No, it's all
have
good.
have a more like dynamic discussion. Like I should have mentioned, like, for my mindset is that how I see America now, and I'm focusing on modern America, not the whole world or the West or whatever you want to
Sure.
like expand it out to. We're more in the mode now of what the Roman, Ottoman, and Mongol empires were when it comes to religious demographics than we were to England or France in the High Middle Ages.
Sure.
We're much more religiously diverse countries. Religiously diverse country. Sorry. So from that mindset, I'm not saying we have to denounce Christianity. I'm not saying we denounce Christianity at all. I'm not saying we spit on it, but I'm just saying we have to be more practical with it. And when below my three examples, the Romans, the Ottomans, and the Mongols, they had I know people are gonna think. Some people are gonna think in here. Oh, wait a minute! Did this empire commit this genocide against this religious group? Therefore, the example is bad. But that's an oversimplification of it. For the most part, these three empires, the leaderships, the emperors, let the religious groups alone for their own for their own affairs. It's like you raise your children this way in this faith. Do what is in accordance with the laws of your faith. When it comes to conflicts between the two groups, then I have a duty as the supreme priest or the supreme the emperor to intervene and to settle these disputes between you. And I like that mindset a lot more. And again, the Romans, Ottomans, Mongols, they didn't deny that they had a religion. They practiced it. They practiced it daily. But they knew where they knew how to be practical. They weren't forcing it on the subjects for the most part. With exceptions, obviously.
So Leon, if I may quickly quickly
Yeah, well,
address.
but I just want to add one more thing really quick. Is that
Sorry,
an issue we have today is the fact that the public and the state are more intimately connected, and that's the public at large. Take education for example. I mean my three examples. They didn't have a massive this compulsory public education system, so that comes and so that brings up questions. Are we allowed to talk about God or gods in public schools? If so, how? I admit that's a thing today that none of these other states or empires have to deal with. I admit that, but that's the mindset we should have.
so
Let the
if I
groups
may,
cover themselves. Oh, go
so
on.
if I may address, and you are correct that we are a very unique situation. I also think that, and this is the reason I believe America should be a Catholic government, a Catholic country, is that first, it's becoming the prime time. Catholicism is growing rapidly. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but also the fact of I think that of all the different religions, of all the different denominations, Catholicism has proven to be the most tolerant. And I'm actually looking at Saint Thomas Aquinas's treatise on law, morality, and politics, and specifically Summa Theologica Secunda Secundae, question 10 on unbelief in general. And the question is the eighth article: should unbelievers be compelled to embrace the faith? Now, it seems like St. Thomas argues they should until people actually read the context. And he says, and I want everyone to pay attention here to not take me off context. I answer that there are some unbelievers who never embrace the faith, e.g., pagans and Jews, and such unbelievers should never be compelled to embrace the faith to believe, since belief is proper to the individual's own will, but the faithful should compel them, if possible, not to hinder the faith, whether by blasphemies or wicked influence, etc. And then it goes on, and whether they wanted to believe, even if the faithful. Sorry, this is an important part. Christian faithful often wage war against unbelievers in order to compel the latter not to hinder the faith, not indeed to compel them to embrace it, since unbelievers would remain free to decide whether they wanted to believe, even if the faithful were to conquer them and hold them Catholic. And now this is the part that's interesting. And there are other unbelievers who once accepted and professed the faith, heretics or any kind of apostates. And we should compel them, such unbelievers, even by physical force, to fulfill what they promised and to hold fast to what they once accepted. Now, he goes on, but let me summarize this. So, Leon, you are correct in that Roman Empire, we are not in the same case as England, etc. That is true. However, and St. Thomas Aquinas would say that while unbelievers, which he says Jews and pagans should not be compelled, heretics should be. Now, it is no secret that Catholics believe that Protestantism is a heresy. Yes, it is just the opinion of St. Thomas Aquinas. However, he is of the most quoted and respected of the doctors of the church. So I'm going to use him as an authority. He's a doctor of the church. His authority is higher than any of ours. But what's interesting about this is if you read on, the same arguments that St. Thomas gives for not converting pagans or Jews applies to the largest majority of Protestants today. St. Thomas's reason for believing that heretics and schismatics, which would technically Protestants and Orthodox fall under that, his reason for saying that they should be compelled is because they were originally Catholic and left the faith. They broke a public oath, which would be scandalous to the public eye, the faith. That doesn't apply to most Protestants. In St. Thomas's time, if you were a heretic, it was because you left the Catholic faith. You were Catholic before. We are in a very rare time in Christianity where people are born into different sects that are not Catholic, and therefore the Catholic Church could use easily philosophy from the Middle Ages to argue that we should not, in fact, compel heretics. And also the fact that we have great examples. This is the last thing I'll say. People really don't need to know my own philosophy on this. So this is the last thing I'll say on the practicality. We see throughout history that the Catholic Church has always been the first to be tolerant to others. A prime example is the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Kingdom of Jerusalem being the religious hotbed of the world, where you had Muslim diplomats like Ibn Jabbar and Usama writing angrily that Muslims were treated better under Catholic kingdoms than Muslim ones. You have only the Catholic Church wrote an entire series of encyclicals and laws defending the rights of Jewish people. In Catholic France, the first daughter of the church, you see that when the Huguenots were in fact becoming prominent, the first thing that the Catholic king did was give them the right to worship peacefully, without hindering the Catholic faith. And the Huguenots eventually revolted and started causing it, even though the king was very tolerant of it. You have cases in the Holy Roman Empire, like the Treaty of Westphalia. I think it was the Treaty of it's Treaty of Augsburg. Sorry, which again, a very brutal time, but nonetheless showed the practicality in the dynamics of the Catholic faith. The reason I believe, and this will sum it up, and there are many other examples I could give, but the reason I believe that America should be Catholic is because of the practicality of it. It's the same reason that Christopher Dawson gives for why Christianity built the West, is its dynamic and flexible nature. In Catholicism, with its very flexible nature being, I would argue, the oldest of the Christian sects and the most flexible in a way Eastern Orthodoxy and Protestantism is not, and also uncompromising on its values, should be the religion of America for practical reasons, especially because Catholicism increases the dignity of the state with its two swords doctrine.
I would just like to say really quick. Oh, go on, Toby.
I must protest. I must protest
Okay.
strongly.
I just want to
Sure.
say really quick for the audience and for the public en masse, these statements have been personal statements. MOA has not officially adopted like a hardline religious position.
You should have made
Hardline
that
being the
clear. I
key word.
apologize.
Yes.
I
Same with
just
UMPA. We haven't made hardline statements either. No.
okay, but go on, Toby.
So I must protest. Maybe Catholics have in the past been tolerant to non-Christians, but I think there is a strong historical case that Catholics have, at least towards Protestants, and Protestants being the majority in the U.S., this would be the most necessary example to bring up. Catholic leadership generally has not treated Protestants the greatest in history. Leading up to the 30 Years' War, the violations of the Treaty of Augsburg, many Lutherans were very heavily oppressed by that. And that's ultimately what sparked the 30 Years' War. After the emperor was putting down the revolt in Bohemia, at that point it was his right to do so. But he then violated the treaty and started attacking the Lutheran princes. And there's also multiple cases going forward well after that where Protestants on the southern frontier felt that they'd honestly be better off under the Muslim Ottomans than under the Catholic Habsburgs. Going back to France, the Huguenots were wrong to rebel. Lutherans have always affirmed that rebellion is a sin, no matter what. Of course, these are Calvinists. They do not agree with us. But there was an attempt to bring peace by a marriage of the prominent Huguenot.
The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, I am aware.
Come again?
I know what you're referring to, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. I am well aware of this.
Yeah. So, yeah. Generally, I don't think the historical trust has been rebuilt enough to where we could justifiably say that America should become a Catholic-led country. I think it should still be a Protestant country. Of course, I believe it should be an ecumenical Protestant who can effectively dialogue with Catholics, with the Orthodox, with fellow Protestants of different tradition. But I feel strongly that if America were to suddenly become a Catholic-led nation, there is going to be very large scale and strong sectarian strife and possibly violence, and that is a very deep concern of mine.
I think that's a fair point. However, again, we can't address all the specific historical issues tonight. Maybe one day we could go on live to talk about the cases individually. However, again, if we're going to talk purely about modern America and the practicalities of how Catholics would treat Protestants in a Catholic state, like I said before, St. Thomas Aquinas' arguments for not compelling not compelling unbelievers who've never embraced the Catholic faith, apply to the large majority of Protestants. And even then, You do not have to agree with St. Thomas Aquinas that you should compel even those who have left the Catholic faith if it will lead to scandal or to the harming of the common good. The Catholic faith is very flexible with that in a way most others aren't. So even if I were to fully agree with you that the Catholic Church had been in many cases more brutal than I had expressed, I don't agree with that, but even if I were, I would nonetheless say that from a practical standpoint of today, if you were to apply the Catholic theology of church-state relations in dealing with heretics and unbelievers to modern day in America, it would be much more tolerant, in fact, probably as tolerant as it is now, with the exception of blasphemy laws. And blasphemy laws specifically regarding desecration of the sacraments. But I understand we are running out of time.
William?
I'm back. So, has everyone finished their final thoughts?
Indeed.
Yeah, for now.
Alright.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, we've just ran out of time.
I would have
Yeah.
let you guys go on further, but I've unfortunately been up since 4 this morning, and I'm trying my best to keep
Please,
going.
please go to bed. The Monarchists of America does not encourage sleep deprivation.
Thank you very much. But if you all would please bow your heads and join me in prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thank you all for joining us this week on Monarchist Minute. We hope to see you again, same time, same place. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Pandora, or another such service, hit whatever the button is. I'll give you the notification next time an episode drops.
And
Follow us
Merry
on
Christmas.
social media. Follow us on social media. Leon, what do you want to plug?
I was just gonna say Merry Christmas.
Oh yes, Merry Christmas. This will be our last episode until after the first of the year. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, and God bless. Follow us on social media if you want to help out the cause. Get a hold of us either via direct message or email, and we will get a hold of you promptly. Until next time, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night.